Welcome to HCC Blue Dragon Media. Today's lesson will cover the exposure triangle, which demonstrates how your camera's ISO, shutter speed, and aperture settings affect the overall exposure of your film. The first part of the exposure triangle is ISO, or light sensitivity level. This setting, which ranges from 100 to 30,000 plus, is directly proportional. A lower setting means lower sensitivity. Typically, most film is shot on lower settings, rarely exceeding 1600. This is done to avoid noise interference, which results in a grainy image that drastically lowers the quality of the film. Here is an example of low versus high ISO. Notice how as the ISO is increased, the intensity of the grain also increases. Keeping your ISO low ensures this effect will not happen. The next piece of the exposure triangle is shutter speed. This setting determines how long your film is exposed to light. Shutter speed is also referred to as exposure time and is measured in FPS or frames per second. In film, shutter speed not only affects the brightness of your image, but also controls an effect known as motion blur. For example, watch these 4 clips of a water fountain shot at separate shutter speeds. Notice how as the shutter speed increases, the image becomes clearer. When the image is frozen, you can clearly see that the fastest setting has the greatest clarity. Our final piece of the exposure triangle is aperture. This setting determines the width of your camera opening. Measured in f-stop, aperture controls the amount of light an image receives. Lower f-stops mean the camera lens is more open to light. This setting also determines which objects are in focus, a function known as DOF, or depth of field. A lower f-stop will have a shallow depth of field, meaning that only the objects closest to the camera will be in focus. As we see in this video, as we increase the aperture, or f-stop, the focus range is significantly altered, with more objects coming into focus on higher settings. You'll also notice that a higher f-stop decreases the brightness of the image. In summary, there are 3 factors that determine a film's exposure level: ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. Knowing what each term means and how they relate to each other will help you determine which settings to adjust in order to get the best overall look for your footage.